So, ironically enough, after the internet caught wind of what happened with Carmelo Anthony and Austin Metcalf, there have been quite the rumblings, the bubblings spilling out of Twitter and places in YouTube now I've seen. Individuals bemoaning and besmirching the existence of violent black culture, which is ironic because Carmelo Anthony would have not been a part of that culture despite your raging against it. But what's more fascinating to me is the extent to which any person who really believes that black culture is particularly violent, and even then, it's like, I'm sure there's pockets of every culture that's particularly violent, kind of can only come from the mind of an individual that hasn't really experienced life with black people, or at least a more nuanced and complex life with black people. Now, considering that I have been black the entire time I've been in this plane of reality, I would imagine that, while not a true expert or savant of black culture, growing up with black people and being friends with black people has certainly taught me a great many things about my existence and their existence. And one of those important things is that being a black person is a lot more complex than studying the way of the knife and just harming people indiscriminately. The goofiest thing about all of that is that a lot of people seem to not grasp this one truth about the world, this one huge, interesting truth about the world, which is one of the many pillars of the reasons why I'm pretty sure that there's a God. And that is, criminality is extremely rare in humans. Which is to say, most humans are not violent psychopaths that desire to harm other people. Overwhelmingly, humans are not murderous people. And overwhelmingly, humans don't just have a predilection to just be antisocial and steal and harm and burn people alive. Overwhelmingly. Even in the cases in history where this is the case, those humans still actually, despite all of the different numerous cruel methods of torture European people came up with, particularly in medieval Europe, and they came with a lot of interesting shaming tactics and just straight up punishments, they're still rare. And even then, and considering that we don't live in that time period, nor in that country anyway, we live here in America, again, if you look at any prison population, or the total prison population, you'll find that it probably makes up, off the top of my head, I can probably count at most 3 million people. That's at most. The interesting thing about that at most 3 million prisoners is that, well, not every one of those prisoners is a violent person anyway. Even if they may become that, you have to still take into account that homicide is not the only crime of which can get you in jail or in prison. And if we just were to aggregate it together, because I know there's a distinction, but it really doesn't matter to make this point, you'll still find that overwhelmingly, most of the people that do find themselves in the penitentiary, well, I can't say overwhelmingly, but most of them aren't violent people. They're not there because a battery. They're not there because of homicide. Some people are there because of tax evasion or embezzlement or perjury or grand theft, right? And you don't have to perform any violence to perform grand theft auto. So, felony theft as well, stealing, I think, what is it, $300 worth of merchandise? Probably maybe a little bit more of that. The fact remains that there are people in prison for misdemeanors too, and there are people who are in prison after they were falsely accused or falsely imprisoned as well. The point is, even if you were to take the entire aggregate of the prison population, if you were to compare it to the total population overwhelmingly of U.S. citizens, including young ladies too, you'll find that overwhelmingly the population in total, every single race included, probably equals maybe 0.005%, if that, to the general total population of human beings in America are criminals, let alone violent criminals. Which is to say that if you're understanding and brushing of black culture is that we're violent criminals and we celebrate violent criminals, you're only really getting a piece of the puzzle. That one interesting piece of the puzzle really is you seeing a particular gender sexually celebrating criminals, but most people seem to not be ready for that conversation. I don't know why people haven't picked this up yet, but you know what? We'll cover that in the next video. In this video, I want to lay out something particularly interesting. And the particularly interesting thing is, I think being terminally online is really the demarcation point here to people's belief structures and to some of these comments that I've seen. I mean, I'll give you one comment off of this recent Sargon video. So this video, I haven't watched it fully yet, but it's another, I guess you could call, log on the dam, I don't know, of this raging against white shame, which is more accurate to white guilt. We'll get back to that in a moment. So this white woman calls the, what, was he 5, 6, 7-year-old black kid? I actually don't know. It was reported he was 5 years old. Maybe he was 6, 7, who knows. Uchigger. I'm going to use that because it's funny. But she used the actual word. She called him an Uchigger. And some Somali sex offender, which is an important detail because records her, and then she calls him an Uchigger. And then some white guy on TikTok saw this happen. That's going to become important in just a second. So allow me to reiterate. Some white guy on TikTok saw this and then asked for her to be doxxed. From that point, she then needed to relocate her home, so she says, and she created a Give Send Go, of which I think last time I checked was at around $250,000 to help relocate her in her time of need. Now, to be honest with you, that one story in particular is so absurdly stupid that I don't really even have the words to fully encapsulate just how many points of failure exist in that. I mean, perhaps I'll table that discussion for another time. Anyhow, one of the comments here I got, again, I didn't actually watch the video. Didn't actually, but one of the comments reads, "We were never meant to share culture. It was imposed upon us." Now that shares, there's the irony of that statement is one thing, right? It's like it's this grand conclusion, another thing, this absurdity that like it's the entire existence. I don't know. I think racism is the stupidest thing that ever happened in the world. But anyway, the irony of that, of him saying they were never supposed to share a culture, it was imposed, is that historically, and see, this is what causes white shame. I understand. I do apologize, white people in the audience. But truth be told, it wasn't actually white people or white culture at any point in time that was imposed on. It was quite the opposite. In fact, the American Negro exists in complete, I would say, branching off of white culture or white American culture. The historical logic behind this is very obvious. The American Negro is American, and all of the descendants of the slaves that were transported here grew up in America. And every bit of culture they would have absorbed would have been from all of the different people that were in America. More than that, if we were to just expand this or just go contemporarily or in modernity, there's lots of things that current white mainstream culture adopts from, I would say, mainstream black culture all the time, like lexicon and slang. For example, when we use the term simp in the manosphere, that originally came from African Americans. Lots of slang and lingo and lots of different pieces of our culture find its way back into the main lexicon of white mainstream culture, which to me is an interesting symbiotic experience that, again, kind of all really just fits under the broader scope of like American culture. And even then, that could be divided between North American culture and then South American culture. And by North and South America, I don't actually mean the continent. I mean literally like the north half of the United States and the lower half of the United States. And even then, the culture that's found in the eastern part of the United States is different than what you find in the central. And even then, the different cultures within different cities. And we can go on and on and on and on and on, and probably write a whole checklist of multiple different cultures that exist in the world, particularly in America. But the fact remains that the idea that you demarcate an entire group or an entire existence as something that was not supposed to coexist as we currently coexist overwhelmingly is so terminally online and stupid that it literally is quite the opposite of what's actually factually true, which is again to say that in every part of which, no offense again, I don't mean to bring up your white shame, which I don't think you should have, but we'll get back to it. That's actually literally what the British did, which is interesting to say. It's more, well, the French kind of did it too in some areas, like in Canada. But the fact remains that it's really the British, more the British than anything. I don't really think Germans, did they? As far as I know, they probably did at some point in time. But the British colonial expansion of their military powers across the world throughout the course of history, ironically, it's really them that impose their culture on other places. And whether it's superior or not is really irrelevant to the point that factually that's just not true. Now, the reason why I spent so much time bringing this up is because that comment is a microcosm of multiple different belief structures and opinions of like cultures can't mix together. And that might be true sometimes depending on the core tenets of the culture. But when it comes to the vast majority of black people that exist in America, that's just not true. I know it's not true because overwhelmingly what you perceive as black culture isn't really even actually black culture. You know, when you get stuff like this.
It's a race thing, sir. If black communities and mainstream black culture in America wasn't synonymous with thug culture, where they celebrate and glorify pimps, drug dealers, and killers, then your son would still be alive.
Difficult to make sure that the kid doesn't become a part of the statistical reality in stabbing an innocent white kid. Is it really that difficult? Hey, you know who doesn't think it's that difficult? Most white people in this country. You guys see the beating that was administered at Temple recently? I'm just going to come out and say it. Most white folks don't fight like that. Do you know that? Most white folks don't jump on a poor black guy like a jackal in the middle of the street and beat the shit out of him. But they're not emulating the same kind of culture. Now, at one point, you might have had the Jets and the Sharks, but some of them were Puerto Ricans, so half of them were white. My point is, it's a different culture. Should be furious with the black community. Let's be clear about this. Not all cultures are equal. And when people say something that you say is racist, they're not even talking about 1 billion black people. I think it's 1.2 billion black people. They're talking about American black culture that venerates and praises gangbangers and WAPs. And I mean, there's nothing good. It used to be black culture. You're talking about the blues.
Like I said, man, the truth be told, you can kind of only feel this way if you just don't spend time with black people, right? And I don't really like it when other people reinforce this belief structure. For one, right? You know, like I've seen other comments where people are like, you know, the excuse people use for all these different like crime statistics is like poverty. Which even then, it's not an excuse, but it would certainly lead to a logical reason that an individual burglarizes another individual is because, well, they want the things that they have. I mean, it's just, you know, A to B to C kind of deal there. But even then, like humans' capacity for evil is not found in simply those who break the law violently. I mean, it could be found in when people do things that don't break the law, like take advantage of others, mistreat others, hold bigoted views that punish them for things that are completely outside of their control, cruelty denying them access to things that could have actually saved their lives. I mean, there's numerous different ways to be evil to a human that isn't specifically breaking the law. The fact remains, though, that again, if your understanding of black culture is just the evil cruelties of a thug or a gangster and all that goofiness, then, like I keep saying, you couldn't have spent all that much time with black people. Because to be honest with you, the guys at RDC World, people, young men, I say young men, he's an older guy. I'm thinking of Michael Jai White, Michael B. Jordan, Donald Glover, Jordan Peele. Those weird guys, just off the top of my head, right, are a much better reflection of how you would find a lot of black men to operate. Andre the Black Nerd being another good example. There's plenty of fans of Star Wars. There's plenty of black fans of Naruto. Obviously, most people in my age bracket it looks like 27 to 35, we all grew up with Dragon Ball Z. It's like etch-a-sketched in black culture or black male culture, black nerd male culture. The truth is, I mean, even that is still, again, like a branching off of the timeline of, which even then, nerd culture in and of itself is still a subsect of white culture. Most people, especially younger people nowadays, like they've been so baked into, the Marvel Cinematic Universe and all of that, and the popularity of all that goofy stuff in comic books and video games. They didn't know that you were a social pariah for enjoying manga. They didn't know you were a social pariah for having a Game Boy at school, right? Like, people thought you were weird. They thought there was something going on with you. Now kids bring a Switch, you know what I mean? And they're just like, oh, let me play, me next. Like, they don't even, like, it's so ingrained into how we exist now. They have no idea that, again, just 10, 15, 20 years ago, you're weird if you brought a gaming console to school, you know what I mean? Or a portable console to school, obviously. And again, even then, black nerd culture, which is still a subsect of the mainstream white nerd culture, right, is still more of these people having things in common with a little bit more edge and flavor than gangster nigga culture is. Most people in general don't like criminals anyway. So it's like the people that actually venerate criminals are the ones that seem to have a sexual proclivity towards them. But we'll get to that in the next video, I promise you. Really, most people overwhelmingly are not fond of criminal activity. And so the idea, unfortunately, I will say this. Black people, we didn't really do a good job with our PR. And maybe part of that has something to do with, the chosen people that run the media and the chosen people that have all these different radio stations and the chosen people that, are the directors of XYZ project. Fair enough, maybe. But there's also the fact that remains is that, like, there is a lot of policing within black culture that does actively deselect from the image of black people being good, virtuous, kind, heroic, wonderful human beings. It's not really an image that's placed in the forefront in most places that you see. I mean, most examples of black masculinity, even when it is heroic, is still an extremely stoic one that does good more subtly than they do good as a paladin or someone that wants to reflect, say, a Superman-esque view of just being the standard or the model, typically. I have some examples. Michael Jai White plays a lot of characters like this who are really good, virtuous people, but on the surface, they look kind of mean and gruff, right? And to be fair, you obviously have your Jack Reachers, and you have your Tom Cruises and Mission Impossible and all of that, but the fact remains that unfortunately, the PR for black people, and black men particularly, is not the greatest. And it's changing. There's people who are trying to do better. And I absolutely appreciate it. I think it's great. But when it comes to the way that a lot of people are looking at black culture, they completely ignore, all the different meme things that we do. This is just one off of Instagram. I just saw that was just really humorous.
He could heal wounds without even weaving a single sigh. In every jutsu he attempted, he was in a class by himself. Everyone viewed him as the ultimate shinobi.
Anime Bars with My Brother Part 2. I've been in the field, like I was farming. My haters, softer than Charmin. I'm new to this, but I do colossal damage. Armin. If you need it, just know I'ma get it, bro. I'm about my bread. I get the dough. And then we gonna see a lot of green. Pick a low. I gotta be a leader. I'm the team captain. When I'm thinking, fingers to the head. Special beam cannon. If I play baseball, my pitch would be the best throw. I keep a long jacket, trench coat. What I be writing down is killer. Death note. My flow is water, Dasani. I keep a designer fit, Versace. You see me cooking, hibachi. My hands fast as lightning, Kakashi. Chris, I'm hungry, bro. I'ma get sushi and watch anime while I eat a crunchy roll. I pull up on Vegeta. I show this punk. He can't go swimming. His son went missing. I stole his trunks. It's time to fade. Sign me up. I got a great idea. Light me up. Aaron's scared to fight. I'm like, yo, tighten up.
You know, the guys at RDC World, they combine the isms of black people's bombastic and expressive slang with the concepts of anime that we all understand and grew up with. And it's that fusion and that hybrid that creates a relatable joke that we all who has experienced the story of an anime can find an amazing, beautiful amount of comedy. And again, what the guy and the guys at RDC World, they do more than just anime stuff. They do sports, they do memes at this point. They do a lot of things with their skit and sketch comedy. And the truth is, again, even they experience, I remember I was watching an interview about them, even growing up, they experienced that same pariah status that some black people experience, or black men particularly. Well, I've seen some black ladies experience this too, to be fair. That same pariah status that used to be a thing. And it really sucks. It really, really sucks because these men exist. Evidently, I keep bringing them up. You know, young men like myself exist. Young men who have experienced, they're all out there, but they're not the forefront of what a young black man. I think, for example, I think one of the greatest crimes against fictional media ever is what happened with Static or Static Shock. For you just to immediately get you, technically his name is Static, but Virgil Hawkins. I think Virgil Hawkins does something that I think is phenomenal, and I wish more characters did. And he's what is known as a spiritual successor, more or less, or is the, how do you say? He is the he is. I'll put it like this: he's the black version of Spider-Man. Not so far as he obviously has Spider-Man's power set, but that all of the different traits that makes Peter Parker, which is his cleverness, his humor, which is his ability to find solutions utilizing his intellect rather than overpowering his foe, his relatability as a nerd, as someone being bullied, or someone that, again, is a social pariah. All of those elements that really makes Peter Parker what he is, not the spider powers, but the hero, the man, it's found in Virgil Hawkins. And he's that black extension and version of all of those great things that makes Peter Parker who he is, right? And like I said, it's a crime against, fictional humanity that people don't get to see how great Virgil Hawkins was. I mean, we had the Static Shock TV show, and that was wonderful, but we don't, we've only ever seen him kind of sprinkled in a couple of comic books, and I think he has a comic book run now, but it's obviously nowhere near as popular as Spider-Man. Spider-Man has so many different renditions, obviously, right? So many different volumes. Static, not really, despite the fact that he has the same DNA and heart and soul as Spider-Man. And I think that the different villains and stories that could have been portrayed could have existed as a great example of so-called representation. And to be fair, I don't think representation at all, by any stretch of the imagination, should simply be found in skin color, by any definition. But the fact remains that when it comes to the conversation of black culture, from our cornbread to collard greens to our to our cookouts, to our roasting sessions, to the fact that spending time with black people is extremely fun. A lot of people, particularly again on the internet, as you see, they don't experience that part of being a black person, the comedic part of being a black person, or the intense, strong, familial part of being a black person, that community part of being a black person. They only see the hip hop, gangster rap, violent news media of black people. And unfortunately, when you combine that image or portrayal of black people versus the white shame, well, you get this new breed of racism, right? This internet breed of racism, I call it. And the reason why I refer to it as white shame is because the term white guilt, the way they people usually communicate it, is not accurate. Like, guilt is a reflection or a regret for the actions one has done themselves. As such, you cannot feel guilty for actions that you haven't really done, or at least not accurately, not realistically. I mean, sure, you can retroactively feel guilt because, say, your brother did something, you know, and you feel like maybe you encouraged it at some point in time. But ultimately, truly, you know, a lineage of, like, feeling guilty or bad for something, the cruelties of your ancestors, is something I've never supported, which you can see on my channel. I've never supported it. I still don't support it. But more realistically, calling it white shame is the shame of feeling like you're a part of a lineage of evil and cruelty and raging against the machine of that. That's really what occurred, unfortunately. And the interesting thing about it is how all of that came at the hands, honestly, and this, they're not ready to talk about this one, at the hands of a lot of liberal white people. Now, granted, sure, did some black people participate in that? Absolutely, of course they did. But a lot of the liberal white people who accepted white guilt, or again, more accurately, white shame, is to feel like they need to do something different to make up for all of the pain and misery that was caused in the past. Of course, I don't subscribe to that. I don't like it. I think it's kind of goofy. I've always thought it was goofy. But the fact remains that transforming yourself into becoming a genuinely racist person, insofar as you speak with true ignorance to a culture and to a people you just don't interact with or spend time with, and you spend so much ignorance not even understanding criminality as a concept, and you find yourself believing that you should remove entire populations of people that only exist here as an integral part of your culture and existence to begin with. You can't have the world you live in without black people, despite the fact you might wish that you could. I mean, sure, maybe I guess if you live out in Oregon, but then you'd have to deal with all the homeless people there, interestingly enough. Anyway, the point is that the American black culture is American. It's a product of America because we've only lived in America, you know, withholding obviously immigrants and second generation immigrants. We're a part of this existence. We're a part of the great experiment of being an American and becoming the very thing that the liberals always said you were. I mean, it does a great job of undoing all the shit I've been trying to do for the last couple of years. And which is, you know, fighting against that feminist white guilt bullshit. I've so many videos I've made about it. And I kind of feel a little bit of a spit in the face myself personally, if I'm allowed to speak personally, because I've seen just how preposterous it is to some of these people. And it really reflects, you know, just how silly racism is, which is to say that even if you love white people and you love their part of the American culture, which I do. I make fun of white people. I make fun of everybody, actually. It's not even special there. But it's like, for as much as I've seen my white brothers suffer, for as much as I've seen, and so many videos I make, it's just all about young men being better people. It's not even a racial thing to me. It's all about all of us. For it all to just be piss in the wind to these people, because they don't see the humanity of something that I didn't even choose anyway. They don't see the humanity of all the other black people, all the other black men who are wonderful people. And they get to this radicalized, you know, foolish, angry point that just will do nothing for them and just not serve them. It's not even something that they could even put into practice, into fruition, of even removing the entire swath or the entire existence of a racial group or a racial culture. It's so painful to kind of see that. I mean, again, if there you saw in the clips, they kept saying we need to talk about it. This video, I've re-recorded it like a few times. There's always just so many things left on the table to discuss. So I guess I'm just going to have to just keep discussing it. I don't know. And in future videos. But I guess in today's video, I just kind of wanted to kind of talk about, I guess, culture. And how ignorant a lot of this new racism seems to be on the internet. And speak on how much I lament, and I just mean absolutely lament the I really, really despise, I guess, the depths of my own failures personally when it comes to this regard. Because I had always hoped to alleviate so-called white guilt or white shame in one way, shape, or another, and by highlighting that it's not something you should ever carry to begin with. It's not. It's ridiculous, I think. But unfortunately, rather than giving peace unto white shame, which is to say, giving peace unto feeling awful or feeling browbeaten by the cruelties of your ancestors, which, to be fair, some white people, their ancestors just weren't those cruel bastards anyway. So, right? Upholding the sins of an entire genetic group. Unfortunately, instead, we get people who just lean into it. They just accept it. They accept the villainy that they were painted with the entire time. And it really sucks because, I raged against the machine of that for years. And ultimately, it doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't mean anything in terms of what I've said then. It doesn't mean anything to those people now because they just paint the broad brush of Black American culture of just such cruelty and villainy and nastiness that just, it's not true. If it was wrong to do that to white people, I mean, just sincerely stupid and wrong. But for some reason, instead of rising above that, they went to just doing the same thing back to black people, and it just really gets us nowhere fast. Unfortunately, it really does. And I guess this will be, my first video kind of talking about it because there's more things to discuss that I just haven't gotten to. So, with that being said, I hope you guys got something out of today's video. I doubt it. But if you did, I don't know, man, go and click the like button. And go and click the subscribe button. Comment in the comment box below. And as always, you guys have yourselves a great day. I will see you cool cats soon.